There we go. We're recording. Let me share the screen. Okay. Okay, so data protection and privacy is what we're working on tonight. Privacy of personal data. All users may not possess the technical, okay, I love how they put may not. I will tell you right now, most users do not possess the technical acumen needed to secure their personal data. Many can configure their personal devices for some degree of data privacy. Most users have taken a keen interest in data privacy. That's because of the amount of news cycles that deal with data breaches. They are willing to be personally involved in protecting their private data on their endpoint devices. Access and use of personal information by corporations need to be regulated by legal means. Concerns over the privacy of personal data have increased the responsibilities of organizations to achieve user data privacy. Controls for protecting data, categories. There are technical and non-technical controls. Technical controls can be classified into controls for preventing access to data, limiting access to data, hiding data, and destroying data. Access controls, limiting or controlling access to assets. Physical access controls can compromise fences, hardware door locks, and man traps. Technical access controls comprise technological restrictions that limit users on digital devices from accessing resources and data. Standard access control schemes and access control lists are used to help enforce access control. Okay, basic steps in access control. Action, description, scenario, example, computer process. So identification. Review of credentials. Delivery person shows employee badge. User enters username. Authentication. Validation of credentials as genuine. Rowan reads badge to determine whether it is real. User provides password. Authorization. Permission granted for admittance. Rowan opens door to allow delivery person in. User authorized to log in. Access. Right given to access specific resources. Delivery person can only retrieve box by door. User allowed to access only specific data. So what they're doing here is scenario is like a physical example. Computer process is what the digital example would be. Accounting, record of user actions. Rowan signs to confirm the package was picked up. Information recorded in a log file. Technical access control roles and terminology. So you have your subject or end user, operation, and you can see some examples here, identification, authentication, authorization, access, owner, and there's this document can be read only by department managers. And there's where you have the object saved. Privacy officer decides users can access this document. And then the custodian reviews security settings on this document. Access control schemes. Ease the workload of a system administrator. A system administrator acts as an access control data custodian or steward for multiple employees using hundreds of thousands of files scattered across a multitude of servers. The framework is embedded in the software and hardware. Types. Mandatory access control, MAC. Role-based access control, RBAC. Attribute-based access control, ABAC. Discretionary access control, DAC. Now let's check. Braden has been asked to serve as the individual to whom day-to-day actions have been assigned by the owner. What role is Braden taking? Data custodian or steward? Data privacy officer, data controller, data processor. And just pick, I know we went over this kind of quick. We're all kind of over the place. Yeah, that's fine. It's because we went over that thing pretty fast. So data custodian or steward that periodically reviews security settings and maintains records. Discretionary access control and RBAC. Discretionary access control is the least restrictive scheme. And this is why it's the least restrictive, every object has an owner. The owner has total control over the object. Owners can grant others access to their objects. Owners can grant permissions to other subjects over objects. Weaknesses: security depends on the decisions made by the user, which means that you have that weakest link issue that we have with social engineering.
Have you ever actually seen anyone use discretionary access control?
No, because it puts too much security in the hands of the end user in most security people's.
Like, I'm just looking at it and it's asking to fail.
Yeah, that's exactly when I learned about it, I said, who would do this? Because I'm thinking of the people that I've had experience with as end users, and there's a handful of them that could do this, but the vast majority of them, it's just asking for major security issues. So a subject's permission will be inherited by any program executed by the subject. So yeah, it puts a lot of the security decisions in the end user's hands, which causes problems in the long run. RBAC is actually RBAC or RBAC is the one I've actually seen the most. This one's also referred to as automated positioning, assigns conditional access. Roles are dynamically assigned to subjects based on a set of rules defined by a custodian. That's usually your network admin or your IT person or whoever it is that's given the job over that. Apparently, this is one of the ones we're getting lots of polling activities. Cora is researching access control scheme. Which scheme will Cora find is the least, we just talked about, the least restrictive? A, B, C, D. Least restrictive. Cope. Somebody went for Cope. Okay, so DAC, that's the one we were talking about. DAC is the one that allows the users to have all the power, which is the least restrictive.
Yep, I'm doing my paper on creating an acceptable DAC scheme.
You can do it if you want to. I'm looking forward to reading it. ACLs, access control lists, contain
It'd
rules
be super
that
simple.
Oh, sorry, what?
It'd be super simple. Just put a sign out front that says free use anyone.
Please come in and take everything. Yeah. Contain rules that monitor the availability of digital assets by granting or denying access to the assets. Types, there's file system ACLs. These filters access to files and directories on an endpoint. Provides file system permissions to protect files managed by operating systems. Network ACLs filters access to a network, often found on routers. A lot of times with the now file system ACLs are GPOs can assign file system ACLs if you're using certain schema. Data loss prevention allows the owner of the data to impose restriction on its use. This is why you don't see DAC used very often. Comprises a system of security tools used to recognize and identify data that is critical to the organization, ensure that the data is protected, involves monitoring access and the usage of the data. Data that is considered critical or confidential to an organization can be tagged accordingly, prevents unauthorized access to that data. Geographic access requirements. Now, I find this very fascinating because it used to be mostly military organizations that use this, but now you're seeing this becoming a lot more widespread. So it's commonly known as geofencing. restrict access of data based on the location of the user. So if you think of it like they use your GPS location and you try to log in and it says, like, let's just say, for example, I have access when I'm at Pocatello at this coordinates in Pocatello. Let's say I work for the FBI. I have access to these files when I'm at that GPS geofencing area. So if someone tries to log in from like Salt Lake, it goes, no, you can't do that. So they restrict utilize a global positioning system to identify location of a device. Location services are used extensively by social media, navigation systems, weather systems, other mobile aware applications. Geofencing can define the geographical boundaries within which an application can be used to access specific data. Did I see someone comment on VPNs? To a certain degree, VPNs can be used to get around this. When you're using low-level geofencing, like, for example, Netflix, when it uses boundaries on, say you want to watch a certain show that's only available in the UK. Well, if you're logging in from a United States-based IP address, no, it's not going to work. But then if you switch it over, then that does help. But they do have ones that they do have technology that is significantly more sensitive, and but for common everyday use, a lot of it can be circumvented by someone who knows how to use proxies and VPNs. Will is searching for information on geographic access requirements. What is another name for this technology that Will can search for? Geolocating, cough, geofencing, cough, geotagging, geoidentifying. I was gonna say, I think if you were listening, I gave you the answer. Yes, geofencing. Encryption, the process of changing original text into a scrambled message based on cryptography, hidden writing, transforming information so that it cannot be understood by authorized parties. You want to know something really funny? I've been rewatching, what is it called? Elementary. It was the take that had Lucy Liu playing Watson. I really enjoyed everything but the last season of that series. And they've actually had some really good explanations of cryptography, encryption, and steganography in there. I was surprised. But yeah, so there are actually some good pieces on that. Use of cryptography, confidentiality, allows only authorized parties to view the encrypted message. Integrity ensures that the encrypted information is accurate and no unauthorized person or malicious software has altered it. Authentication validates the identity of the sender. Non-repudiation prevents an individual from reneging on an action in a fraudulent manner. Obfuscation intentionally renders a message obscure or unclear. Limiting access to data, often used to secure intellectual property, helps creators maintain specific rights over their content by controlling the usage and distribution of the content. I find intellectual property laws fascinating. I think that the way that we do it in the United States is significantly backwards, but it's just my personal opinion. So if you ever want to go out and look at intellectual property law, I highly suggest it. So know your own rights and just be aware of what's going on. Determining the right degree of access to IP is a challenge. Digital rights management, access control technologies designed to restrict the use and duplication of digital content across a wide range of devices. Watermarking, an invisible and unique embedded piece of information added to authentic IP, means by which pirated content can easily be traced back to offending users, often used with DRM. Okay, I'm going to give you a little piece of information that I did not know when I first started learning things about buying digital media from places like Amazon and iTunes. According to their user rights, their EULA agreements, if at any time they decide, let's say you've already purchased this piece of media, it's in your library, if they decide to yank it, even though you have paid for it, if you do not have it already copied somewhere to a physical piece of media and you're relying on them to give it to you, according to the EULA, doesn't matter. They can yank it from your library. I did not know that when I originally was in that, but I was like, this seems fishy. And this is why I find the way that the United States does intellectual property law and digital rights management very backwards. That's the problem. You want them to take away all the stuff that they push out for the bloatware, and they don't, but they try to take the good stuff. Yep. Hiding and destroying data. There's de-identification, helps prevent de-identification and use of data. Data masking creates a copy. Are you? Goodness, I'm a very sneezy kitty. Creates a copy of the original data but obfuscates sensitive elements. Tokenization obfuscates sensitive data elements into random strings of characters. A token, the original sensitive data element and the corresponding token are stored in a token vault. Destroying data. This is actually one of my favorite parts. A final control for protecting data. To delete, the delete command in an operating system does not erase data. Data can be retrieved by using third-party tools. There's a lot of really good free ones. Wiping overwrites a disk with zeros and random data. Degaussing destroys a hard drive by reducing or eliminating its magnetic field. That's great, but that doesn't work on some of the new technology. That only works on things that have magnetic spinning parts. Or yeah, if you want to go take it to the range and blow it up, you can do that too. We used to joke about that with if we had particularly vexing pieces of network equipment, we used to joke about, hey, let's retire it and go take it up to the range and make sure it's properly destroyed. Non-technical controls, identifying data. Involves knowing the data types that are present, determining data ownership, and classifying the data appropriately. Data types include the following. High risk. What are you? The cat that's decided to dig in the trash in the middle of my lecture. Thank you so much, Kitty. That's not at all irritating. High risk exposure of data will result in serious consequences. Sensitive exposure of data may result in fines or costs up to $1 million. Internal exposure of data could result in reputational damage, a loss of competitive advantage, or higher costs of business processes. Public data is freely shared on public-facing web pages. Sometimes you'll see public data called directory data, and that's just because a lot of times it's already out in what it's called a directory. Data ownership defines the duties of a data custodian and a data owner. Classification of data is based on the standards of the organization. Commercial establishments have no standard for classification. Now I'm going to put a caveat there, no official standard for classification. Sometimes they will adopt the similar classification for government organizations just to make it easier. Classifications used by some organizations are public and confidential. Yeah, that's funny. I'm not sure I want to cook my hard drive and Hot Pocket at the same time. Something tells me that would give it a interesting taste. I have seen what a microwave can do to a CD though, and that's entertaining.
I was just going to point out on the data or identifying data and the classifications. I don't think I've ever seen anyone who isn't either working or part of the government or working with the government using government classifications for data, just because it's extremely limiting.
Yeah, if you adopt a full one, sometimes they'll use like they'll refer to it like that, but they don't actually adopt them like you would in the government. So yeah, that is a good point. Kitty, no. I think that's, sorry, right in the middle, retaining data. My toolbar was smack in the middle and I was like, I think that's what it says, but data retention involves determining how long data must be stored. Retention standards, specifications set by regulatory bodies that determine the period of time for which data should be retained. Basic principles for data retention. Do not store personal data for longer than needed. Organizations must be able to justify the retention period for personal data. Set a data retention policy that determines standard retention periods. Periodically review data being retained and erase or tokenize it when no longer needed. Thoughtfully consider any challenges to the retention of data that arise. Okay, so let go of me. You're the one being grumpy. Don't bite me. So one thing I will say about this is there are, from what I've seen, 5, 7, and 10 year, at least at the state level, retention. A lot of those have to do with things like public records requests. Oh, she's been grumpy as heck today. I don't know who peed in her Cheerios, but she is just mad about everything today. Okay, knowledge check. Which of the following is not a basic principle when considering the retention of data? Always retain data for 6 months after it is no longer used. Organizations must be able to justify their decisions. Periodic reviews of the data being held are necessary. A policy must be in place. Okay. There is no official 6-month rule unless it's put in place. I do like the cope. That's going to be my like end of class. I'm going to have to put a test question in for one of our finals on that. Limiting data. Restrictions followed regarding the collection and uses of data are based on the following. Data minimization. This limits the collection of personal information to what is directly relevant and necessary to accomplish a specific task. Purpose limitation. Data collected for one specified purpose should not be used for a new or incompatible purpose. Little note on this. The reason you want to do that is because you don't want to collect more than you need, because later you're just going to have to figure out ways to destroy it. So the less you collect, it's kind of like least privilege. That's what I think about it when it comes to personal information. If you don't need it for any official use, don't collect it, because you will have to figure out how to store it, how to secure it, and how to destroy it. Controlling data. Data can be controlled through legal requirements. Data sovereignty. Country-specific requirements that apply to data. Data collected from a nation's citizen must be stored on servers in that country. That's kind of difficult sometimes, especially when it comes to cloud stuff. So they're non-disclosure agreements or confidentiality agreement. One party agrees to give a second party confidential information about its business or products. Second party agrees not to share this information with any or other entity for a specific period of time. It's not always what NDAs have to deal with. There are all sorts of different NDAs you can sign. Data privacy. Privacy. The state or condition of an individual being free from public attention, observation, or interference to the degree that the individual chooses. Understanding data privacy includes knowing reasons for users' concerns, understanding the consequences of a data breach. User concerns include individual inconveniences and identity theft, associations with groups, statistical inferences. So do you know what they're talking about when they're saying statistical inferences? I'm hearing dead quiet here. So what they mean, oh, I got a couple of people. Marketing, personal ads, not just that. There are times when you have things like, specifically, let's say health information. If someone steals your identity and uses it for going to the hospital or doing something like that, you may have chunks of their health information hooked into yours then. And then all of your statistics having to deal with health stuff or financial things, then you have that sucked into yours, and getting those things that have just been meshed into yours taken out is a lot harder than it is for them to steal it and use it in the first place. Okay. Concerns regarding how private data is gathered and used. So there's issue and explanation. Data is gathered and kept in secret. Users have no formal rights to find out what private information is being gathered, who gathers it, or how it is being used. I don't know about you, but that makes me nervous. Accuracy of the data cannot be verified. Another thing. Users do not have the right to correct or control what personal information is gathered. Inaccuracy may be suspected. Some cases, inaccurate or incomplete data may lead to erroneous decisions made about individuals without any verification. I have seen this happen with things like FICO scores, where say they pull something in from someone that looks like you or someone that is using a similar name, and it takes a while for it to show up, and it's very difficult to get off of your credit report. Identity theft can impact the accuracy of data, like I was talking about. Victims of identity theft often have information added to their profile that was the result of actions by identity thieves. And even the victims have no right to see or correct that information. That's where I have the problem right there. My identity was stolen. I should have the right to see. Oh my goodness. Grumpy cat is grumpy. See what they've added and fix it. Unknown factors can impact your overall ratings. Ratings are often created from combinations of thousands of individual factors or data streams, including race, religion, age, gender, household income, zip code, presence of medical conditions, transactional purchases, information from retailers, and hundreds of other data points about your individual consumer information. How these different factors impact a person's overall rating is unknown. That is because, like, we have the 3 different credit bureaus. Each one of those credit bureaus uses different formulas. And it's like that when you deal with banks and credit unions. They also use different formulas. There is no standardization. It drives me nuts. Informed consent is usually missing or misunderstood. I don't know if you've ever actually read some of those agreements, but they are written in legalese, and a lot of legalese, even though I understand it quite well for the average person, it's still made to be confusing. Statements in a privacy policy such as "we may share your information for marketing purposes with third parties" is not clearly informed consent to freely allow the use of personal data. Often users are not even asked for permission to gather their information. Data is being used for increasingly important decisions. Private data is being used on an ever-increasing basis to determine eligibility in significant life opportunities like jobs, consumer credit insurance, and identity verification. Yeah, the terms of service agreements are terrible. And I think they make them long and tedious and incredibly complex because they don't want people to read them. Data breach concerns, reputation damage, bad publicity surrounding an organization that has been the victim of a data breach usually results in a tarnished reputation. Remember Yahoo? So Yahoo Mail used to be the big thing before Gmail, and then they had a breach of millions of users, and that lost a huge amount of victims. I mean, a huge amount of, sorry, I read victim on there while I was talking to you guys, a huge amount of customers, and now they're kind of considered a laughing stock. IP theft or intellectual property, theft of IP that the organization or its customers may own, fines. Several federal and state laws have been enacted to protect the privacy of electronic data. Businesses that fail to protect data they possess may face serious financial penalties. Those have become more and more severe because people just are like, oh, whatever, I'll just eat the fine. Yeah, that's okay. But when you think about how many records on an average data breach are out there, and then you start multiplying it, it gets expensive fast. Okay. So that is it.
The ironic,
Oh, go ahead.
the ironic thing is all the charges and fines for those data breaches, yet the people who are actually affected never see a dime.
Yeah. Or if they do, it's like, here's $6. I think I actually got one of the profit sharing things from Yahoo, and it was like 6 something. I can't remember. It was really, really bad. German, did you have something?
I was just gonna say, like, you know how, like, when some people say that credit card companies will charge your account a late fee, and they do that even though you're on auto pay. I just remembered were a friend and I, we both used to work for a certain bank, and he ended up dealing with a lot of the automated payments that were not necessarily like on user end that you set up. It was through the mail-in service through third-party companies.
Yeah.
And there was always like the gray area of like, well, if they don't cut a check certain amount of time, you may see a late fee. And so he started like tracking all these accounts that would have that. Like they would miss it by a day or something, and there would always be a late fee. And the policy was like only one late fee per year, you know? And it was like, as the more he dug through it, he's like, I don't think I can work here anymore.
Yeah, there are some very, very shady policies when it comes to those. There was a local credit union. I'm not going to name names, but if you look it up, you can find them. They got nailed because, there's overdraft fees and stuff that you get charged. What they started doing was and I had a account here, and I was actually made aware of this. I thought I saw it happening, but you always like, oh, maybe I didn't see that. But I did a lot of I do a lot of online banking, like a lot of people do, and I noticed that I would look at the account and see how things came out, and then I'd go back and look, and like they had reordered how the payments were pulled out, and it came out that they were doing that in a way so that they could collect overdraft fees. And I was like, there was nothing in their policies that said they couldn't do that technically, but they got in a lot of troubles because it was technically a predatory thing. So it's very interesting, the loopholes they get around, and they can get away with, there's all sorts of different corporations that can get away with that for a while before, the laws and catch up with the technology. So are there any, let me stop here before I ask about questions, because that's it for the main part.